All right. Central question L. What were the causes and effects of political decentralization in Europe during the time period? So, first thing we need to talk about when it comes to Europe is Europe is in a dark age. I don't care what anybody else tells you, it's still a dark age. All right. It's still a dark age. It's just not as dark, it's just not as backwards as we used to talk about it. Okay. It's still a dark age. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. Okay. If there's a case where you're having to argue with them, that's the key. It's just not as dark as we used to talk about it. Okay. So now to get to the point here, the reason why we call it a dark age is because innovation was low. Okay. Innovation was low. And cities were very small and it was decentralized. Okay. And so when we talk about decentralizing, we're talking about how much power does any one individual have. So if we think about it as a pyramid with the leader on top, it's decentralized would mean if we've got this much land, power, et cetera, that people are taking care of, we've got a bunch of little pyramids, over all that land and power. Okay, so we've got a bunch of tiny kings. They're kings, but they're in control of very little. Okay, that's decentralized. The rest of the world is more like this. Lots of power, okay, lots of power by one individual, by one government, particularly if we look at China, particularly if we look at Dar al-Islam. Okay, so that's a couple of the reasons why Europe is in a dark age, but it's also good to compare Europe to the rest of the world. Okay, that's another reason why it's a dark age, is because there's so little innovation going on in Europe. Okay, the innovation is happening in Asia, the innovation is happening in Dar al-Islam, but we know that Europe eventually becomes the powerhouse of the world. Well, that happens because they steal, right? Or they trade with people who have innovations from those other areas. So gunpowder from China, compasses, I think, from Dar al-Islam, and sailing, specific type of sails, lateen sails, from Dar al-Islam. Okay, so those things make their way to Europe, and guess what? Europeans make good use of them. Columbus sailed the ocean blue in 1492. He wasn't sailing no ocean if he didn't have lateen sails, good sailing technology, particularly compasses. And once he got there, he wasn't going to kill massive amounts of indigenous peoples with just a little pokey stick. His military inventions, firearms, for one small example, albeit, are why Europe was able to then conquer the globe, even though when everybody else was rocking it, when China and Dar al-Islam were rocking it, Europe was just like blind. Can somebody turn the lights on, right? Think of it as a dark age. It's like somebody flipped a switch, turned out the lights in Europe. If we can think of like a light bulb over somebody's head, So that is why we call it a dark age. Now, decentralization. Oh, come on. Never enough time. Okay, decentralization. We don't just want to talk about political decentralization during the time period. We also want to talk about the Black Plague. Okay, those are the two biggies that we need to come out of this. Okay, and I'll actually talk about the Black Plague in the next video, but it's good to have it on your radar because it'll be in this reading as well. So feudalism. Think of feudalism as those pyramids, right? Remember, centralized, decentralized, bunch of little pyramids, one big pyramid. It's all centralized up to the one guy. They were decentralized, okay? But they still have that structure of peasants, lords, and kings up top. And the peasants and the lords, well, they're giving wealth and farming, so crops, food. That's what they send up to the king, and the king sends down protection, okay, and leadership. That's the basic setup of feudalism. Feudalism, FYI, sucks. It's a terrible way of organizing things because it's all based on loyalty, but people aren't really freaking loyal in the time period. It's a terrible way of organizing themselves. And there's a reason why Europe was in a dark age, okay? The Chinese had a really good way of organizing their people. That's why they were able to flourish, okay? Think about needs, okay? Think about needs. A government has to address the needs of its people in order to be successful. And with feudalism, they couldn't, okay? They could not protect their people particularly well, and they couldn't feed their people particularly well, all right? You don't do those things, you're not going to be successful. It's one of the reasons why there was a dark age in Europe. Okay, double check my notes. Nothing I skipped that I wanted to talk about. Cool. This video is really hard to make for some reason. I feel like I look like I was just wanting to pee my... And it's still 6 minutes! What the crap? Oh my God! I'm not redoing it. I'm not redoing it just so it's under 5 minutes. That does still want to make me cry.